So, welcome back. So this is chapter 3 videos that helped you to understand a little bit on the assignments questions. Well, I know some of you guys may have some problem picking up the assignments questions in chapter 2 because maybe you have taken the principal class a very long time ago, or maybe you haven't actually touched the microeconomics textbook or even in general economic textbook for a very long time. But that's okay. I would say we'll take this course very slowly. So for the first 2 weeks of assignments, I'm going to grade you very leniently. So even though some of the questions may not be 100% correct, still, I'm not going to tick off a lot of the points from your assignments. Indeed, I would like to see students showing some of their efforts to try to pick up those basic concepts from our principal micro classes. Well, today we are going to go through this Grossman model in brief because we have already illustrated the models in the PowerPoint. So just want to briefly go over this concept here and trying to pick up some technical skills that we learned in microeconomics to apply to this model. First of all, well, let me just go over the models here again. Well, the ultimate goal for this model is to explain, well, whether people want to choose the health or health in general just comes into our life and we don't actually choose it. So in order to find out whether do we actually choose the health level that we desire in life, or what level of health we actually want to achieve, we have to first build up some of the assumptions, just like any model we learned in economics. Number one, the Grossman model actually started with a utility functions. So a utility function basically explains the happiness of an individual person. So in this case, we have a utility function, ut, at time period t, that is contributed by 2 important factors in our life. Number one is health, and the other one is home goods. So we define health as a health condition. We don't actually define health here as the health inputs, like the health services that we use, or maybe taking a vaccines, or maybe taking some pills. But in general, this HT here represents the health conditions of that individual in the functions. So ZT here basically represents all the other goods that we consume and use and to make our life happy, like going out to spend some time with friends, or maybe just go out there to play basketball with our friends, playing badminton, going out there to play video games, or watching a movie. All these things that we do in life that is not related to health, well, in general, we just categorize it as home goods. So obviously, if you look at your utility functions, you might actually find out, well, higher level of health generates more utility in life. Because, well, basically healthier means, well, we can actually enjoy a little bit better of life, right? So we can feel good about having a good life, good health. ZT also has the same effect on utility. The more home goods we have in our life, well, the better we are and more happy we are. So these 2 factors, or these 2 variables here, actually has a positive impact to utility in this individual's utility functions. So the book also talks about how health can be a consumption good in our life. We actually consume this health to make us healthier, to gain utility. So this is a direct rule in this Grossman models of health. However, the model also explains how health can be an input in the productions of health and also at the same time for home goods. So let's take a look at this production functions here. So how are we actually going to produce health and also home goods in our life? We actually assume the current periods of health, HT, is actually derived from 3 main factors. So the 3 variables here include ht minus 1, which is the previous health conditions, and th at time period t, so it's the time we spend on health activities, such as spending times to go to visit doctors, spending times to have this dental clinics, spending times jogging outside the park, spending times maybe going to the gyms. So all this time that we actually spend to make our health conditions improve, well, it's basically what we define as TH here. And also, some time to make us better in health or improve our health conditions, we need some inputs. So we have to buy something in order to get our health better. So MT basically represents all the market goods that we buy in order to improve our health, such as maybe the medicines that we buy when we get sick, or maybe a vaccine that we would like to pay in order to avoid getting sick during the flu seasons, or maybe other factors that can also make us healthier, like the shoes, the running shoes that you buy so that you can run every week, or maybe the badminton rackets that you buy so that you can actually exercise yourself. So all these things that related to health, and you will buy it from the market and spend money on it. Well, basically it's represented by MT here. And ZT is the home goods. So what produce home goods enjoyments in our life? Obviously, you have to actually spend time in order to gain some utility from this home goods. So TZ here basically represent that time that you spend on leisures. And not only just time that we will actually result in higher level ZT, but spending time producing home goods, it's important, but sometimes we cannot just spend time and do it without any market input, such as if you want to actually play games with your friends, well, you can't actually have nothing to play with your friends. So sometimes you might actually consider maybe buying a game boards, right? A set of games to play with your friends. Sometimes you might actually want to buy a video games consoles in order to play game with your friends, or maybe buying a pair of movie tickets to go to a movie with your girlfriends or maybe boyfriends. So there are certain market goods out there that we have to buy, which is JT here. So JT basically represents the market goods that we buy in order to produce ZT in our utility functions. So at the end of the day, well, we are having time on leisures and we are going to spend some time to do some healthy activities. And that's not the total time we spend in our life. And the book actually defined in a very simple way how we spend our time. So let's say this theta here basically represents the time that we have in one day, let's say 24 hours. Well, this 24 hours, it's actually not only divided up into leisure and health activity. In fact, it actually divided up into 4 different parts, include TW, the time you spend at work, TZ, which is the time you spend on leisure, TH, the time you spend on health activities, and also TS, which is the time you spend on the bed being sick. So in this model, we actually say TS is the only time factor that we do not want in our life, because in general, when people, it's actually spending time on the bed and not working, not doing anything, obviously it's just waste of our time in life. So this sick time that we define in this model, it's basically a non-productive time in life. So we are trying to eliminate all this sick time in our life. And the only way to do it, basically, is to increase the level of health. So only if we can actually produce more health, then we are able to generate better health to avoid being sick on the bed. So this is a very basic layout of this Grossman models here. So just like how we talk about the production functions, we know there are several factors in the production functions in health and also home goods. Well, obviously, the better health we have in the previous periods, it will make today's health a better conditions. The more time we spend on health-related activities, also it will increase the health level of the individuals, and the more of the health products that we buy from the market, again, it will also increase the level of health conditions. Well, same for the home goods. The more time we spend in leisure, obviously we can produce more home goods, and the more capitals or more market inputs that we can buy with our incomes, like games, movie tickets, obviously it will also increase the level of home goods in functions. Well, understanding this, it's a fundamental way to know how health can be an input in our production functions. But what's more important to note here is, first, since we have the times in life that divided up into 4 parts, so that also means we can only earn a fixed amount of income, or maybe limited amounts of income by spending certain amounts of time in life to work. And the concept here actually represents the income earned by the individuals, which is YT here at time period T. It's coming from the wage that you make at time period T multiplied by the time you spend at work. So for example, if you are given or maybe offering by some company that the company will pay you $20 an hour to work, and you work 8 hours a day, obviously that day you are going to earn a total of $160 income from your work. And the model actually didn't specifically explain how your wages is being determined, but we actually have the idea. Usually wages, it's derived from the education attainment. So that means the higher educations you receive from your college, it will actually give you a higher level of wages. But the lower education attainments you receive, of course, you can only stuck with the minimum wage. So by logical sense, it makes sense. But in this case, obviously, you might actually want to take a look at this chart here. Right? So we have 24 hours a day. Let's say if given the conditions, this person here, this individual, actually spending 10 hours on the bed being sick. So that means this person is not healthy. That left with only 14 hours to spend on other things, which is productive to our, or maybe has a positive impact to our utility. So we might only have 3 hours spent on health-related activities, 5 hours spent on leisures, and also spending 6 hours at work to earn income, to buy the market inputs for health and also for home goods. Well, what's the benefits for this individual to gain health? What is the benefits received by this individual in order to improve his health conditions? Well, obviously, if you think about it, it's a pretty simple math. If this person can actually go to a doctor, or maybe go take some pills, or maybe trying to work out himself so that he can now only spend 2 hours being sick on that day, and that means, well, this person actually have 22 hours left to contribute to work, leisure, and health activities. So in this case, this person might choose to spend 4 hours jogging outside, or maybe spending another one sometimes in his life to engage in some health-related activities. 6 hours that now he can spend with his friend or maybe family, and another 12 hours to work to earn some income to buy the market inputs for health, like medicines, or maybe running shoes, or maybe even the market input for home goods, which is the game PlayStations, the movie tickets, the opera tickets, and so on. So in this model, actually health become a very important components to this utility functions, and also limited choice of time, because we always constrained by time. We never actually want to spend time sick and reduce the level of utility in our life. We always want to get more and more utility. And by doing that, the only way we can do it is to get better health in order to maximize the time on productive activity like work, leisure, and health. So, if we are going to look at this Grossman model again, we kind of know where the health become part of the inputs, production inputs, to generate both health and also the home goods. Because, well, more time we have spent on productive activity like work, leisures, and health, obviously it makes us happy in many different ways. So by generating more health, of course, it will create less of the sick time and more of a productive time. So let's take a look at this labor-leisure choice that we usually see in our labor economics. We always choose between how much time we would like to spend on work and also how much time we want to spend on leisure. So let's say we're given a fixed amount of sick time and health activity times in life. Well, we have to make a choice. So the downward sloping curve here actually represents all the possible choice that individuals can make. So for example, this person can spend a total of 12 hours, which is after discounting the time from health activities and also sick time. Well, the rest of the time left, it's 12 hours left. So this person can spend 12 hours to earn the maximum income and have no leisure time at all. Or maybe spending 12 hours on leisures and nothing on working time. Or maybe you can actually think about somewhere in between. It could be the case this person actually prefer more leisure than working time, so he would choose 2 hours of work to earn a little income and then put in more time to do some non-income related activities for leisures. And also it could be the case that this person worked regular 8 hours and then have 4 hours to spend on leisures. But which point on this labor-leisure choice is the optimal for this person to choose? Well, obviously, we need another tool in order to find out. And this is the tool that most of the students in the principal microeconomics might not learn, which is coming from the consumer choice theory. So, in brief, we basically need another tool that we call the indifference curve. So the indifference curve basically is a curve that illustrates the values of both goods given the same amounts of utility for different combinations of the two goods. So for example, we can actually think about this person might actually prefer some level of working time and some level of leisure times. This one curve here, we call it U0 here, which is the utility curve, represents different combination set of time choice that will give this person the same level of utility. So for example, this person might spend 10 hours on leisure and 4 hours at work, will have the same utility as spending 4 hours at leisure and 8 hours at work. Well, why? Because when people spending more time at leisure, of course they can enjoy a little bit more time with their friends and family, or maybe doing something that they liked, but at the same time they have to give up some income. So by working very, very small amounts of time, they will have very less income to spend. And by spending less of the time on leisure, well, they will make up this partial loss of the utility by working longer hours to earn income, to buy something that they want, like a movie ticket, or maybe buying some sports tools or equipment in order to get higher level of utility themselves. So this utility curve, basically it's what we call indifference curve, because any point on the same curve basically represent the same level of utility. So this utility curve, we can actually kind of imagine there are so many different levels of utility. the further out of this utility curve actually represents a higher level of utility earned. So for example, for this U0 here might be representing the utility level at 10. On any point on this utility curve, U1 here basically represents a utility level that it's equals to 12. Or maybe U2 here, it's 14. Well, why? How do we know? Well, you can actually imagine if we have the same time spent on leisure, instead of 4 hours at work, now this person can spend another few more hours at work to earn more income. So that means, well, this guy will have more income to spend on other market goods to produce more health and produce more home goods. So further out represents a higher level of utility, basically. That's what it means. So from the economic perspective, we actually kind of look at this constraint faced by this individual. This is basically a constraint on time, right? So this person can choose any time between work and leisure, any point on this constraint. It's possible. Depends on the utility that this person earned from different time that choice that he choose. So this indifference curve can also be illustrated here. So this individuals will always choose the optimal time at work and optimal time at leisure by looking at the tangency of this time constraint on the utility curve. So that means the person will choose any points on this constraint curve, which the only choice makes sense for this person is when it's tangent to the indifference curve or the utility curve for this individual person. Well, why? Because you can actually think about if this person choosing any point like here, where the utility curve actually touching the constraint, well, this 2 point here actually represents there is a opportunity to earn higher level of utility, because obviously the person can actually go a little bit further to have less of leisure to earn more income in order to compensate himself. So the only point that it's optimal for this person to choose, it's always the tangency of the indifference curve that tangent to the time constraint. So there are a lot of things that we can learn about the indifference curve, but for now we just want to briefly go over the indifference. The indifference curve here basically represents a combinations of the two goods that we can actually get in our life in order to earn the same level or same values of utility. So to continue the analysis on Grossman model, of course, we not only care about the leisure time and working time. At the end of the day, we actually care about, well, whether people choosing the level of health in their life. So the Grossman model actually represents this graph here on the board. What the graph actually represents, it's basically a production possibility frontier model for health and home goods. Unlike the traditional PPF model, of course, you don't see the outgoing curve. Instead, you see these half-ball shapes on the diagram, which represents people in general actually can have an opportunity to gain more health without sacrificing any productive activity like work and leisure. So this sections here on the graph from point A to point B on this PPF model, it's what we call the free lunch zone. So this section basically represents the opportunity for a person to gain more health so that the time increase will be able to contribute at work and also to leisures more, so that we actually gain more from getting better health. So as health actually increase, well, not only we are getting more time to do health activities to become even more healthier, but also it gives us more time to spend on other types of activity, like at work or maybe at leisure, so that the home goods, right, we have more time to spend at leisure. That means we can actually earn higher and higher level home goods. However, after point B, we are going from point B to point C. This section, it's basically what we call the trade-off zone. So in this zone, basically, people now have to find out whether they should have more health or maybe home goods. Because in these sections on the graph, any points represents an opportunity cost in life. So we can still improve our health by putting more time and putting more inputs into health-related activity. However, the time that we gain does not compensate for the time that we lost in work. So for example, we might actually put in an additional 2 hours running, but then it only gain us, let's say, 15 minutes of healthy time or productive time. So that means 15 minutes of less of the sick time. So that 15 minutes contribute to work or maybe leisure does not actually give enough to compensate for the 2 hours that we spend on running. So in this case, basically the time that we gain does not compensate what we actually gain in health. So we have to decide whether to have more health or maybe spending those resources like time and market goods on home goods. So this is basically like a trade-off we see in the time constraint. So instead of talking about time here, well, we are talking about the constraint that we can spend resources on health and also home goods. And we are doing basically the same thing. We will actually put out this indifference curve in the graph, and to illustrate, well, there is one level of utility of different combinations of home goods and health. There is another level of utility that you can actually gain. The further out of the utility functions, or maybe the indifference curve it is, the higher level of utility we can gain. At the end of the day, the optimal choice in this model is people thus choose the level of health. So we can actually have this maximum level of health. We can be very, very healthy without any sick time, without any concern about our health, when we're putting all the resources into this health-related activities or maybe health inputs. But the thing is, when we are doing this to gain maximum health, we have to give up everything on home goods. So we don't have any resources spent on leisures, we don't have any resources spent on buying the movie tickets. We are going to give up everything that we do in our life that is not related to health. Then obviously this is not the optimal choice for any single individuals. Well, only people who care only about health, they will choose this point. I think the book actually illustrates when we have this vertical utility functions or the indifference curve, then you will see people will always choose the maximum health. On the other hand, if people only care about home goods, so they don't care about health at all, well, the optimal choice for this person to choose is point B here, where you will see the horizontal indifference curve that tangent to this point right here. So to continue with our models, we actually can apply this production possibility frontier that we actually explained earlier to the reality, right? So in the reality, we actually trying to look for the optimal level of health and also the optimal level of home goods that we should get in order to maximize our utility. But there are something that happens in life that could actually expand that production possibility frontier. So for example, technology usually is the one that refer to this expansions of production possibility frontier for health. So in the choice that we make in life, without any new technology or maybe with a standard technology in the country, we might actually have a production possibility frontier to illustrate the choice for home goods and health here by this inner circles of the production possibility frontier. However, with new technology comes into our society, such as maybe having a new drugs in our life that actually help us to heal from some of the diseases with less of the time to recover. Or maybe having some new equipments that help us to do exercise more efficiently, or maybe to help us to reduce our weight with less time spent on the equipment, or maybe even just some new procedure in surgery, right? So there are some procedure that helps improve the recoveries of the patients. So after doing these surgeries, comparing to the traditional one, we may have to spend 1 month on the bed to recover. Now this surgery can actually only take maybe 1 week or maybe even just a few days for the patient to recover from the surgery. So one way or the other, the idea is whenever this new technology, this innovation comes into health industry, well, obviously this will expand the opportunity to produce more of both health and home goods. Well, how do we know? You can actually think about this way. So at a given level of health, so let's say before the new technology actually comes in, well, we are basically assuming this is the level of health that we would like to achieve. And this is the level of home goods that we would like to achieve. Well, given the opportunity with this new technology, well, to holding this same level of health, now we actually have more time to spend on, well, home goods, right? So with the same level of health that we get, well, because this magical pills, or maybe this wonderful equipment inventions, or maybe this very advanced procedures in the surgeries actually get us from this level of home goods to an even higher level of home goods, because now the resources that we have to spend to produce home goods and also health, it's become more available. So we know it when the production possibility frontier model actually expanding outwards. It's when we have more resources, or maybe we can actually produce health more efficiently so that we can spend our resources on other things in life. Well, obviously, when we are actually holding the same health, but getting more of the home goods, we can actually see a few more movie, or maybe buy a few more nice meals for ourselves, or maybe just spending money to go to trips on Europe. Well, obviously, those things will make our utility increase. So the idea for this exercise here basically is illustrating how technology, or maybe some of the health-related invention can actually help increasing the level of outputs for both health and home goods. And to understand that relationship here, basically the health investments, which is the resources we devote on health activities, it's basically illustrated in this model from this explanations here, keeping the same level of health. Now we only require to devote this less of the resources in life to get this same level of health, so that we can actually spend more time on, let's say, work to earn higher level of incomes, or maybe spending more time on leisure to actually go out there to hang out with our families or friends, or maybe just spending the money, which is income, on buying those home goods, which is like the movie tickets, or maybe a new TVs, new video consoles, instead of spending a lot of the money on improving health. So this is very useful models that we want to explain how the technology will improve the level of health and also home goods in our life. But one thing worth to note, sometimes the impact of this technology might not be clear on other health-related activity. So one question that we would like to ask is, when we have these new drugs, or maybe this new equipment, or maybe these new procedures in life, well, how is it going to affect our contributions on health activity. So how much time we would like to spend on, let's say, going out for joggings, or maybe spending times to go to the gyms, or maybe spending some incomes on buying some health-related equipment. To be honest, when we're actually seeing a higher and higher level of production possibility frontier in our life, it's sometimes ambiguous to talk about the change of these health-related activities. Well, there are two effects that explains the reverse of the story. So number one, when we are getting healthier and healthier, we can actually try to spend less time on health-related activities. So what does it mean? When we have these new drugs, new equipment, or new procedure in our life, we know it. We have to spend only very, very small little resources to get the same level of health. So that means, well, instead of going out to joggings every day for 1 hour, well, now we think that, you know what, we can actually deal with all this sickness with this very advanced technology. So we don't, or we no longer need to spend time to go out there to jog. So this substitute effect actually tells us when we are getting this higher level of productions for both health and home goods from this new technology, it actually allows us to substitute from health activity to other non-health related activities such as leisure. So instead of jogging out there for 1 hour, you might actually want to think about, well, you know what, instead of jogging, we can actually play video game with our friends, because well, whenever something happens, I have this new technology that heal or maybe providing me such a good health, or maybe so efficient to produce this health in life. On the other hand, there is another effect that counter for this substitution effect. So when we are actually producing this health so efficiently, we're using the same, so little of the resources in life to produce health, we might actually think that, well, you know what, it's worth our time and it's worth our resources to put in a little bit more to even gain a little bit more health in order to have higher level of health to gain our utility in life. So the other side of the story actually is described by the income effect in economics. So the more efficient it is, well, the more likely people will devote resources on health-related activities so that they can even pushing the health further further levels. So both effects actually simultaneously going into our heads when we trying to make a decisions on these choices in life. So talking about so by using some of the information we pick up from this chapter, we can also talk about how education is related to health choices, or maybe how educations can later in the next chapter explain the disparities of health. So first of all, let's think about this issue here. Given the examples, there are two individuals here, one with a higher education with a college degree, and then the other ones have a high school degree. And the wage, we assume it's set in the market by the level of education attainment that individual has in the background. Well, it may not actually explain all the situations in the world, because sometimes wages actually does not relate to the level of education attainment in life. But let's put it this way. Let's say someone who has a higher wage only because he has a higher education attainment. Well, in this case, we would like to actually find out how individual A with a higher education attainment will have a benefit to keep a higher level of health comparing to individual B. So let's suppose they are going to work 40 hours a week and try to think about, well, how is it going to affect the health outcome for both individuals? So let's suppose we're trying to first figure out the income of both individuals given the wages it's already laying out here. So individual A is going to work out 40 hours, and each hour of work worth $20. So in 1 week, individual A can actually make total of $800. For individual B, on the other hand, he's going to work the same time, 40 hours, and each hour he get paid of $10. So at the end of the week, he can maximally earn $400 of wages. Well, obviously the income is difference comparing the two individuals here, but how is it going to explain individual A will have a higher chance to be healthier comparing to individual B? First of all, you want to think about the models that we described earlier. So higher level of income or maybe wealth actually contribute to two production inputs in the utility functions. Number one, income here, it's actually related to the market inputs that we can buy, such as MT and JT. So that means the person who has higher income, they can actually have more money to spend on buying health-related goods and home goods home good related products. So in this case, obviously, individual A will be healthier, or maybe has a higher opportunity to be healthier comparing to individual B, because, well, basically, individual A has more money that's available to spend on health-related products. Maybe they simply just because this person has more money to spend on equipment so that he can exercise at home, or maybe he just have higher level income so to spend on buying expensive medicines to actually maintain his health level, versus individual B will have lower level of income. So this is one way how to explain education's actually put a important aspect to the level of health individual will choose. Well, let's put it into another situation. What happens if we assume both individuals is going to earn the same level of income, right? So here we are actually explaining different level of income that contribute to either the inputs for health and the input for home goods. Now, I would like to say, well, what if both individuals now earn $50,000 a year with these wages? So in this case, each person earns $50,000. Individual A is going to work, well, how many hours depends on the wages. So total $50,000 you will earn divided by $20 per hour. So that means individual A will have to work 2,500 hours in that year in order to earn $50,000. On the other hand, individual B will earn the same level of income, $50,000 divided by $10 per hour. That gives us 5,000 hours that individual B has to work. Well, in this case, well, how are we going to explain individual A will have a higher chance to get healthier comparing to individual B? Obviously, it's coming from the fact that individual A will have more time to spend on either the leisure time or maybe health-related activities. So compared to individual B, he has to put more time at work in order to earn the same level of income. Now individual A will have more time to spend on health-related activities and also leisure. Assuming the sick time they have for both individuals are the same. So obviously, the productions of health depends on not only just the inputs for the market input for health, right? Not something that we can buy with our income, but at the same time, it's coming from the fact that how much time we are willing to devote on health-related activities, such as maybe going to a body check every single year, or maybe spending time in the gym, or maybe spending time jogging and such. So with higher level of wages earned by this individual A, obviously, well, in two ways that we explained, individual A will have a higher chance to be healthier in this model comparing to individual B. So we can actually sum up the idea here with this labor-leisure choice that we mentioned earlier. So comparing the time constraints of both individuals here, you can definitely see that individual A will have a higher level of time to spend on both leisure and work comparing to individual B. So the constraint B facing is much tighter comparing to individual A here. So that means individual A will have more times available to spend at work and also leisure. So assuming both of them actually trying to maintain the same level of health, because individual A is such an efficient producer of health, right? So he can actually devote more resources on other things except for health-related time. So the time that he spends on work and leisure can be at a higher level comparing to individual B here. And obviously, this leads us to a conclusion, well, not only individual A can actually maintain a better health, but at the same time, he will be able to manage more time at work to earn high level of income comparing to individual B, and at the same time, to spend more time on leisure instead of what individual B can do. So this all leads to the conclusions because A is a more efficient producer of health. So therefore B, individual B will not try to match up with individual A because based upon the fact that if individual B want to actually try to maintain the same level of health with A, well, there will be a lot that individual B has to give up. So including the working times, the leisure times, the possible resources that he can buy for creating home goods, JT there. So all these resources will be devoted on other things that could possibly create more utility. So individual B will never actually try to match up the health of individual A just because that he has to give up too much in life in order to get that health level. So that's a very important conclusion here because, well, later in the next chapter, we are going to describe, well, how these explanations here actually describe the reality, what happens in the reality where people actually have a different health level according to its education or maybe level of income or maybe by different social status. So the last part of this chapter is talking about whether we should invest into our health, right? Especially when we're assuming health is not a one-time period decisions. It's actually a multiple periods of decisions we have to make in our life. Well, in the last part of this chapter, actually the book talked about how health can be part of the capital stocks in our life. So today's life, today's health condition actually affects the next period's health. So obviously, when you are healthy in this year, you will assume yourself to be healthy the next year too. So you exercise this year, well, you keep going and going and going, and then it builds up all this muscle in your body. Well, obviously, the next period, you will see yourself to be healthy again too. So this is very logical reasonings to assume, well, we have to actually find out what level of resources we should actually invest into health improvements. So in order to talk about the efficiency of this health investments, we actually illustrate by this MDC curve, the marginal efficiency of health capitals. So how much capital, how much investment we should actually invest into health productions. So there are several things that we can actually think related to health. Specifically, we talk about the health production. It's basically generated by using time on health activities and also spending money on health-related market inputs. So this graph here illustrates a different level of health starting points. So if you are very healthy, you are okay healthy, and also you are very, very sick, the returns for this capital stocks actually generates a different returns in your life. So this rate of return here that we represent in this graph actually related to the increase in lifespan's utility. So when you are actually very sick, putting some level of capitals to improve health, it's going to generate a very, very high returns from your utility, because the fact is, well, you get yourself a little bit better in conditions. Now finally you can actually go out there to work to make yourself happy from having more of a home goods, and at the same time, because of better health, it actually generates a better utilities in your life. You feel more happy. When you are actually doing fine, you're just social, right? So you're not actually doing bad at all. By putting some level of health capitals into your life, obviously it will generate some utility, because again, well, not only you now can have time to work, to earn income, to buy stuff, but at the same time, because you are spending less time sick, so you can actually spend more time with leisure, right? So, or maybe you can actually spend even more time to go out there to jog and to make yourself even better health. So there's return, it's not as good or appealing when you are very, very sick, but then the return is still pretty good. However, when you are actually extremely healthy, you haven't been sick for several years and you know it, you have this routine exercise that keeps you up, well, the more of this capital that you throw in to produce more health can only generate very, very low level of returns from utility. Again, why? Because you are already healthy, you are basically maximizing your productive time. So you don't have any sick time in your life, and to be honest, to get even better health, you will only get utility from health, right? You feel yourself better, you have more confidence in yourself, but it's not going to generate more extra times on work, and it's not going to generate more times on leisure. So that's why the return from your utility will be a little bit lower compared to when you were actually sometimes sick. So does it mean that the returns will go into infinities, right? So should we actually forever invest all this money in order to get this infinite many health? And to be honest, I would say most of the cases, it does not worth most of the people out there to invest their incomes or maybe time to have ultimately unlimited amounts of health, because obviously it comes with a cost. Well, what are those costs? So there are in generally two types of costs that we can define. Number one is the cost that you spend from other resources you can produce your home goods, right? So basically it's an opportunity cost. So those money that you can spend on, let's say, buying movie tickets, those time that you can spend with your friends, those time that you can actually go out there to get a second job to earn extra income to buy extra stuff. Well, obviously you are spending those time on health, so that, well, you are missing the opportunity to have more of all the other things. So the income here, basically, it's something that we define as the cost of health investments. Well, how are we going to illustrate the cost? Well, it's by interest rate, right? Because obviously the income that you earn, you're not going to spend on other things, but you spend on health. Well, basically you're losing a chance to put it into a saving account to earn some interest payment in return in the future. Well, same here. The future returns are basically deducted by this interest rate if you are going to put those assets into health-related products. Well, another type of cost that we also define in the book is basically the depreciations of the health capital. Well, what does it mean? In general, we just basically referring to the fact that, well, in the biological reality, every time we
getting older, or maybe we eat something, right? So the next day we have to eat again. Well, this is basically a very normal functions of a body. So we have to consume every day 2,000 calories, so that we have to eat 2,000 calories in order to maintain our regular activities as adults. Well, same here. The depreciation described that 2,000 calories that we every day use. So that means every day your body depreciates the capitals, that something that you eat, by 2,000 calories. Or when you're getting older and older, well, your functions of heart, your functions of your lung, or your other organisms, it's going to depreciate. It's not going to be as efficient as before when you were young. So all this facts about your body actually being depreciated over time. So it's not a fixed, constant depreciation you will face when you are aging, but instead the depreciation of health actually change as your age changes too. So the total cost here we define as the interest rate you can possibly earn with your income or your assets, and also the depreciations of health capitals, which is the investment you put in that will depreciate over time. So let's suppose I have this cost, it's equals to 5% here. So let's say the depreciations of health plus the interest rate is equal to 5% of returns in your lifespans. Well, we know it's, that means the cost for health investments is equals to 5%. So in this case, well, obviously we will actually try to pick the level of health we want in our life. Right? So why is it not reasonable to pick this extremely healthy choice? So why can't we just pick this point right here on the MEC curve? Well, obviously, when you are getting only 2% of a return from your health investment, but it costs you 5% to invest on this health investments, well, the gap between these two here basically explain to ourselves, well, it does not worth to put that much of a resources in our life to invest on health, right? Because, well, the return is only 2% to make you happier, but then, well, the cost of your life is 5% from your utility. On the other hand, well, you can actually think about, well, how come we don't just pick this choice of health and have this high returns from the health investments? Well, in this case, unfortunately, well, you have a very, very high return when you are very sick, but then, since you have the opportunity to actually keep investing more on health capitals, right? So you know it, the cost for the health investment, it's only 5%. You only have to not waste, but you have to give up 5% of utility in your lifespan in order to get healthier, but it only now it's giving you 10%. So that means you can actually keep lowering and lowering and lowering the returns of this utility in order to actually get to a higher and higher level of health. So this gap here actually suggesting, well, when you have this high return from the capital stocks, you want to make yourself even happier with higher level of health related to the cost that you have to invest. So this is basically the fundamentals concepts of this Grossman models. Well, it depends on how well you absorb the theoretical models here, or maybe to understand individuals' graph, right, that described in the textbook. But overall, this is relatively theoretical models that we study in health economics that helps to build up this foundation to explain the disparities of health outcomes from different social ethnic groups or different social economic groups. So next time we are going to learn about the disparities between different social economic groups in the economy, and why we find someone have a better health over the other people. So I will see you next time.